Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get going in a few minutes here. And so thank you for being here today. And we'll begin our presentation shortly. Thank you for your patience. Okay, everyone hear me in the back okay? Awesome. Good afternoon. My name is Mike McFarland. I'm a senior project manager with Tyler Technologies, and I'd like to welcome you here today, along with my associate, Mr. Ryan Zuck, with us today as well. And we are happy that you're here. This is an information session in order to have a better understanding about the forthcoming reassessment and the steps in that process, and how the reassessment might affect you as a taxpayer and homeowner. I would like to ask that we hold questions until the end of the presentation. The presentation itself is approximately 20 to 30 minutes. And further, that if you have questions for the benefit of those that are with us virtually today, that you please line up in either one of the podiums and ask your question into the microphone, again, for the benefit of those who are attending virtually today. So thank you for that. And so, why has Kent County decided to undergo a reassessment? Well, in short, it was court-ordered. Delaware's Chancery Court ruling found that the taxation system in Kent and all the other 2 counties within the state of Delaware to be outdated and not in keeping with Delaware's prescribed law. In particular, if you're interested, here is the legal document where there's a lot more detail related to the court's ruling. So, in short, Kent County was ordered by the Chancery Court, again, along with the other 2 counties in the state of Delaware, to undergo a county-wide reassessment. And so, why was the reassessment ordered? What was the basis for the court's ruling? In short, the court determined that the assessment levels or property values have changed significantly enough since the previous reassessment in 1987 and no longer represented the true and correct value of money. To say that differently, it no longer was representative of your home's current market value. As such, the reassessment is scheduled for tax year or to be effective in tax year 2024. So it's a few years before the product of the reassessment, the estimate of your home's current market value takes effect for you. And so why is a reassessment important? Well, reassessment, in short, is a countywide. It applies to all parcels, residential and non-residential parcels throughout the entire county. There's approximately 88,000 parcels in Kent County. It applies to each and every one of those, and it's intended to restore equity within a property class and across property classes. And so what that means is for within the residential property class, in its simplest example, and for all other property classes as well. So the first step in the reassessment process occurred in July of 2021, whereby Kent County's levy court contracted with Tyler Technologies to provide the reappraisal services. It should further be noted that the other 2 counties in the state, both Newcastle and Sussex, have also contracted with Tyler Technologies to complete their reassessments as well. And so a reassessment, as you can tell, it's a large-scale project. It affects each and every one of us in this room. And with this change, this reassessment, comes with certain fears, understandably so. First and foremost, the fear that you as a parcel owner or homeowner would pay more in taxes. Understandable concern. Second, that the government, as a result of the reassessment, would in turn spend more money. Also a legitimate concern. And last but not least, perhaps on a more personal level, that the reassessment would uncover certain improvements done to your property over time that the county was otherwise not aware of. So the elephant in the room, as far as these fears, and probably the reason why you're here, the ultimate question, will you pay more? Will a new assessment mean that you pay more in taxes? And in short, the answer is, it depends. And so we're going to flush this topic out a little bit more through the next part of the presentation and discuss why it depends and what actions you have throughout this process to control whether you agree with the observation of characteristics for your parcel and likewise the associated estimated new market value that will be a product of this reassessment. So in short, and substantiated by the court's recent ruling, a property's assessment should correlate or represent or reflect its true and correct current market value. As market values increase and decrease over time, assessed values might not keep pace with that. And that's certainly the case throughout the state of Delaware. In Kent County particularly, the last reassessment in 1987 probably does not represent the market value for each and every parcel today. That's a fair statement. I think now whether it's greater than or less than, chances are the assessed values that were based in 1987 probably do not represent what the current market value is for any parcel throughout the county today. So what does that mean? That means that over time and right now currently, some homeowners are paying a greater proportion of their fair share, while others are paying less. That's what the reassessment is meant to do. The primary objective of the reassessment is to redistribute tax equity within the property class, within residential for one homeowner versus your neighbor, and also across property classes between residential and non-residential property class. The reassessment, again, process will correct these inherent inequity. If your assessment does increase, it does not necessarily mean that your taxes will increase. And we'll go through some conceptual examples of how that could be the case, again, a little bit later in the presentation. So the next topic here as part of the reassessment related to whether your taxes will go up and related to whether the government will spend more is the question as to whether the county or school will collect more taxes as a result of the reassessment. And so everyone should know that the county and school districts are capped by state law on how much additional revenue can be generated following a reassessment. Specifically, the county is capped at 15% increase in tax revenue following a reassessment. Likewise, the school districts are capped at a 10% increase in tax revenue following a reassessment. Any additional proposed increases must be advertised publicly and are subject to approval from the public. Government spending. A reassessment does not, again, increase or decrease the tax revenues themselves. It redistributes the total tax burden back to that concept of equity across and within property classes more fairly by setting new assessed value. While the overall impact on a community is capped by state law, individual property owners may see their taxes increase or decrease. And so I think it's worthy to flush this last part out a little bit. The county looks at the total rise in assessed value as a whole or in an aggregate. And the associated tax rate is then lowered. So there's an inverse relationship between the aggregate market value and the associated tax rate. That, however, is distinctly separate from each individual parcel owner. And we'll talk again conceptually about how a parcel owner might see their taxes increase or decrease. So we talked about the county, the school district, and if you live within a municipality, there's that third local government authority to consider. So if you live in a municipality, you should know that said municipality may, by separate vote, seek to adjust their portion of the property tax rate. You should further know that some municipalities will rely on the county's prescribed assessed value, while others will develop and rely on their own assessed value. So, in short, if you live in a municipality, it would be best to contact your local municipal authorities should you have any concerns about how your taxes will be impacted for the municipal portion of your tax bill after you receive your new county's assessed value. Okay, so the inverse relationship between a rise in market value and a lowering of the tax rate. So here's an example. Visually, you might only be able to see the estimated market values from, so this is, here we have a base year of 1987. We have an estimated or assessed value of $55,900. In 2024, this same home might change from $55,900 predicated on a 1987 market and might change to $335,000. Let's use this as an example. So you'll see down here, $55,900 Take notice of the tax rate. The tax rate is 0.30, the result of which is a tax bill of $167 and some change. Now let's move to the estimated new market value of $335,000. Take notice here, it's effective for tax year 2024. The assessed value is $335,000, but look what happens to the tax rate. It goes from 0.3 to 0.05. Again, the inverse relationship between a rise in market value and a lowering of the tax rate is a very important concept. So the resultant taxes, despite the fact that this home is assessed at significantly greater than what it was previously assessed, is still $167 and some change. Notice the difference is about 20 cents. So this is the conceptual example of how each individual parcel might see a fluctuation in their taxes. And notice that it's relative to the average change for a property class. And so in the first example, you have your property's value change. So your assessed value change, just like the example on the last slide, from $55,000 to $335,000. If your property's value change is lower than the average for that class, so let's use residential as the example for class. So if your value change is lower than what is the average change for your neighbors, then it's most likely that your taxes will decrease. In the second example, what happens if your property's value change is similar to your neighbors, similar to the average for residential property? Then the most likely outcome from a tax impact is that your taxes most likely will not change. And then last but not least, if your property's value change is higher than the average for your neighbors or against your neighbors, then the most likely outcome is that your taxes would increase. So I want to focus on 1 and 3 for a brief moment. If your property's value change is lower than the average, that means the inverse of that would mean that you are currently paying more than the average of your neighbors. And so it makes sense that your taxes will likely go down. This is the equity, the restoration of equity. That's the objective of the reassessment. Conversely, the third example, if your property's value change is higher than the average for your neighbor, the most likely outcome is that your taxes will increase. Well, another way to say that is you probably have been paying less than your fair share in the current assessment schema. And so I just wanted to flush those two different examples out and hope that everyone understands the difference between the total market value across all parcels in the county versus what you might be subject to on a parcel-specific basis. So the last fear was the discovery of unknown improvements. And so in a typical example, let's say that you added a garage or shed some time ago and conveniently forgot to get it permitted by the county. It happens. Maybe you added a pool too. Also happens. So it should be known that discovering and updating our assessment records for previously unknown improvements across any parcel throughout the county ensures equity and that everyone is paying their fair share. So to say that differently, during the reassessment process and the field inspection process and subsequently the valuation process, we will observe all the improvements or buildings and structures on your home, notate them, and it's possible and probable that they will add value to the overall parcel's value. It does not, however, mean that we are retroactively looking for any recourse by way of reporting back to the permitting authority in Kent County. That is not the objective. So in other words, we're merely observing the improvements that might have occurred over time, and we are considering them to add value, but we are not retroactively reporting back for any recourse to the county's permitting authority. There are cases, before I go on, there are cases if it's extremely egregious that it might become relevant for us to report back. For example, if you put an office building on your parcel and then get it permitted, that would probably be an egregious example. But for the most part, it's the reassessment's intent is not to report back to seek legal recourse for any unpermitted improvements to your parcel. Okay, so we flushed out the fears, and now we're going to talk about the phase of the reassessment itself. What is Tyler Technologies going to be doing? And we're going to spend a lot of our time on the second phase because it's a very important part of the process. It's the longest part of the process, and it impacts you up front when someone comes to your parcel for a field inspection visit. But first, the first part, and it's already been completed in spring of 2021, aerial imagery was obtained for the entire county, and that was done by fixed-wing aircraft by a business partner of Tyler, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a following slide. But the aerial imagery for all parcels throughout the county has already been completed, and we will use said aerial imagery as a resource in our toolbox to verify things like parcel boundaries, parcel locations, things of that nature. The second phase of the reassessment process, and again, the longest part, and perhaps arguably the most important for Tyler, is the data collection process, or what we call boots on the ground. And so you'll notice that the data collection process is set to begin shortly, fall of 21, and it ends in mid-2023. So it is a multi-year process. As you can imagine, inspecting 90,000 parcels takes some time. After we gather all the information as a result of the data collection, the boots on the ground effort, then we get into the analysis phase. We start to analyze the information or characteristics that were collected at the time of inspection. From there, the last portion of the process is the valuation, whereby you would receive a tentative or estimated market value, and then the associated informal meetings should you disagree with the estimated market value. That will occur between mid-2023 to late 2023. So as mentioned, the flyover was conducted in early 2021 from Eagle View. This is not a Tyler Technologies project or product. However, again, the photos that we've obtained from Eagle View will be utilized as a resource in our toolbox to make sure that we have verified all the pertinent property characteristics in an accurate manner. The data collection process itself. So in short, trained data collectors will visit every property throughout Kent County. Data collectors can be identified by their bright yellow Tyler vest and Kent County issued photo ID badge. So safety for everyone involved in this project is a paramount concern of ours. And so we want to conspicuously identify ourselves so that you, as homeowners, will be aware of, hey, there's someone driving down my street, there's someone knocking on my door. We want to make sure that safety and security are involved throughout the project, but particularly during the data collection phase. And so one of the ways we're going to do this is to, every data collector will be wearing at all times a construction style vest. On the back, you'll notice that it says Tyler. And on the front, you'll notice on the front bottom left, what will be the bottom right for you guys, is a Tyler logo and Tyler again in print. This will be in addition to, Ryan, do you have your badge? Thank you. I know you might not be able to see it, but this is a photo ID Kent County issued security badge that will be produced upon request should you feel the need to verify or you have any concerns about who might be visiting your property. All right, and last but not least, related to safety and security, on our reassessment website, there will also be a section that will post the photo from chest up about of every data collector that might visit your property. So our entire team of data collectors, there will be photo IDs on the website should you have any further concerns about security. So what's going to happen when we actually get to your home? Well, the first step is we're going to knock on the door, and we're going to attempt to interact with you. We're going to hand you an informational brochure, and we're going to ask you certain characteristics about the interior of your home. For example, bedroom count, bathroom count, things of that nature. If it's the case that you're not home, that's okay. We will estimate the interior features or characteristics of your home, and we'll talk a little bit more about participating in that process or to correct any errors or omissions in a little bit if it's a case that you are not home, or even if you are home and we happen to get the data wrong. So from there, exterior measurements will be taken of your primary improvement and any associated ancillary building, like a shed or a garage. A photo will be taken of the front of your home from the street, and that goes a long way in verifying our records and confirming that we visited your property. That photo and all of our other records will have a date timestamp on them. So all observations, notations, sketch changes, and street level images will be documented or warehoused in the county's CAMA software system. CAMA is an acronym for Computer Assisted Mass Appraisal. To say that more simply, it's a database that is specific to real estate valuation work. It should further be noted that if it's a case where there's a minor present and no adult or guardian, and said minor opens the door, Tyler will not be interacting with the minor. So we will say, hi, we're with Tyler Technologies. We'll ask for an adult or guardian. If an adult or guardian is not present, we will simply say, have a great day, and conduct the exterior inspection without the minor's involvement whatsoever. Okay, so I'm going to pause briefly. The first step or interval throughout this reassessment in which you can participate is actually right here today. Coming to these information sessions to better understand what the reassessment process looks like and what you can expect throughout the course of the project. So the first step of participation is right here today, and we do thank you for being here. The second step at which you can participate is after we've conducted our inspection of your home, we're going to send to you a data mailer, what we call a data mailer. And you can expect every parcel owner will receive one, and you can expect to start receiving these spring of 22. Said data mailer is going to have, I know it might be tough to make out on the screen, but it's going to have all the property characteristics that were observed at the time of inspection and that complete our record. Bottom left-hand side, you'll notice this is a sketch. And so in addition to collecting the information, we're also going to sketch the primary improvement and any additional or auxiliary improvements as necessary. And last but not least, see that photo taken from the street. That will be included in your data mail. If it's the case that anything is wrong or incorrect, this is the part in which you can participate by correcting what's on the data mailer, affixing your signature, and sending it back. And so we know that through the course of approximately 90,000 parcels, we may get some stuff wrong. And this, again, is the part in the process in which you can participate and say, hey, Mike, you know what? You said I have 4 bedrooms, but I actually only have 3. We'll take the information here and update our records accordingly. This gives us confidence that the information we've collected is as accurate as possible. By allowing you to participate, no one knows your home better than you. And so by allowing the opportunity to correct any missing or wrong data, it really strengthens the accuracy of our estimated market value. Okay, so we've spoken a lot about residential, and similar to residential, we will be asking, by way of an income and expense report mailer, certain characteristics or information specific to non-residential property. So this is what we'll call an income and expense request. And essentially, we'll be mailing these to non-residential property owners for investment-grade real estate in the summer of 2022. Commercial properties are oftentimes valued by either the cost approach or the income approach. And so in this case, what we're asking for is income and expense information. To say that a little differently, what is your rent received if it's an investment-grade piece of real estate, and what associated expenses do you have with that real estate operation? Surveys, this is known as a survey, an I&E survey. Surveys will gather current and relevant income and expense data from owners of commercial, industrial, and apartment properties. All information obtained will be held strictly confidential. So to flesh this out, there are different forms of income and expense statements, and they are particular to the different subcategories of non-residential property. And so in the first example, again, I can understand if you might not be able to make some of this out, but we'll be looking for retail, industrial, warehouse, and other types of similar income-producing properties. What kind of questions or information are we seeking? Well, what's the total gross building area? What is the net leasable area? How many floors is the building? Who occupies the spaces? What is the use of said spaces? And again, all these factors or pieces of information are what we're requesting through an income and expense statement. Now, slightly different version of the same form for apartment building, and more specifically, apartment building, resorts, hotels, and motels. Slightly different questions, but essentially the same concept. We're looking to ascertain income and expense information specific to income producing or investment grade real estate. So in this case, we'd be looking for what kind of amenities are offered, how many units are in the building, what is the configuration of each unit if it's different, or if there are a multitude of configurations, things of that nature. And so, again, I appreciate that you might not be able to see some of the details in the form, but the concept here is that we're going to be sending I&E reports or mailers out to non-residential property owners where applicable, just like we're sending data mailers out for residential property owners to verify the characteristics of your home. So along the same lines as the data mailer, we encourage everyone to participate. In this case, property owners and or their assigned managers are encouraged to complete the forms to the best of their knowledge. This gives us information that is critical to determining fair and equitable values which reflect the current local market condition and will preclude the use of available published rental and expense information. And so to say that differently, it's always great to get actual information that is parcel specific. If it's the case that we do not have actual information for income and expense statements, then we will revert to market information. So for other similar properties, what would the rent be? What are the associated expenses? So we've talked about the data collection process. We've talked about the verification of the data collection by way of these mailers, the data mailers in particular for residential homeowners. So then what? Well, we have all this data. We put it in a big database. Now comes the analysis phase. And so some of the factors, not all, certainly not all, but some of the factors that might go into the estimate of your market value, your new market value related to this reassessment would be the location. So the site-specific location of each parcel. What are the market factors? What's the debt market doing? What's the cost to borrow? Things of that nature. What's the age of your improvement? How old is your home? What level of depreciation has occurred? What's the condition of your home? What kind of improvements are on your property? Improvements, another way to say that is structure. How many structures are on your property? What are they? And then last but not least, you've all heard the golden rule of real estate, which is location, location, location. So what kind of neighborhood is that particular parcel? So it's most typical for residential homes to be valued by the sales or market approach. And for the record, there are three approaches to value: sales or market, the income approach, and the cost approach. And so for the residential homes, it's most common to rely on the sales or market approach. And so our analysis portion, a comprehensive sales study, will occur for all properties sold within Kent County over a 30-month period, which ends on June 30th of 2023. And so for those of you who have ever purchased a new home or refinanced your current home, you may be familiar with the functions of a fee appraiser, whereby in its simplest form, they would identify three comparable sales, they would adjust for any dissimilarities, and they would provide an opinion of market value or an estimate of market value for what that home that's part of this transaction or refinance is worth. The process, the appraisal process, is exactly the same for mass appraisal. It's just that the scope is significantly larger. And so we will consider and interpret closed settled transactions in the market, make sure that they are similar to your particular property, and that's the scope of work. It's again, very similar to what a fee appraiser would do for a transaction or a refinance. It's just a larger scope. We have to assess or estimate the market value of 90,000 parts as opposed to one. So how does that occur? Well, Tyler's valuation specialist will use the collected data, the observations from the field, and it will be calibrated and specified to a computerized model that is specific to Kent County. So some of the portions of this analysis or valuation phase, we were going to identify separate markets within the county as a whole. We will develop the models relating price, property characteristics. We will use the models to identify comparable sale prices to subject properties being valued, and we will select ultimately the appropriate comparable sales for each subject or parcel throughout the county. So we spoke about this a few slides ago, but again, there are three recognized approaches to value and real estate valuation. They are the cost approach, the income approach, and again, the market or sales approach. And so the cost approach establishes or provides an opinion or estimate of market value based upon the replacement cost of the improvements, less its depreciation, and then you add back in the land value. This method is most oftentimes used in the residential and commercial property classes. The income approach estimates value by capitalizing the net operating income of a property. Net operating income, just to tie it together from a few slides ago, rent received minus expenses in its simplest form, that would be your net operating income. And then that net operating income is then capitalized by an appropriate capitalization rate. That produces an estimate of market value for income producing property. And then last but not least, the one you're probably familiar with, the market or sales approach, again, where we estimate value by comparing sales, so sold, settled transactions of similar properties to the property being appraised. They are then adjusted for any dissimilarity. So for example, if one home had a deck and the other didn't, then an adjustment would occur and be appropriate. So once the analysis phase is done, in November of 2023, property owners will receive a notice of the new tentative appraised value or market value. And I just want to emphasize the word tentative. It's tentative for a reason, and we're going to get to why in a second. Each property owner is encouraged to ask or evaluate whether that new estimate of market value is reasonable. If the estimate is reasonable, then no further action from you is required. And so this brings about the third part of the process at which property owners can become involved. So, again, each property owner, the real question to ask is, can I sell my home for this much money that's being suggested? If the answer is, to the best that you can ascertain or believe, if the answer is no, then we encourage you to come back and talk to us. Much like we're requesting interaction for the data mailers for incorrect or omitted characteristics, we're also asking for interaction if you believe that the estimate or tentative market value of your home is incorrect. If you believe that you cannot sell it for that price, then we'd certainly encourage you to come and participate in what we call an informal review. If you think it's reasonable to what you could sell your home for, then we probably won't hear from you. And naturally, if the new tentative appraised value is significantly less or less than what you believe you can sell your home for, then we expect to not hear from you. So, again, the question is, can I sell my home for this much? Again, to the best of your knowledge. If the answer is no, then we encourage you to come down and schedule what we call an informal review, the third part of the reassessment in which you can participate and have some control over the outcome. So if you believe it doesn't reflect the current market value, there will be instructions in our mailer of our tentative market value about how to schedule an informal review and what kind of information we'd like you to bring, if possible, to support or substantiate your position. For example, in its simplest form, you could say, hey, my neighbor sold their home for $15,000 less than what you have your tentative appraised value for. Okay, great. Bring it down. We'll take a look at it. These reviews give each of you the opportunity and a simple and efficient means to communicate with us before the finalized certified assessment roll is conducted. And so again, if you believe that you can't sell your home for the amount of money that we have it tentatively appraised for, then we encourage you and invite you to schedule an informal review. So the goals, again, of the informal review, you will get a one-on-one meeting with Tyler appraisal staff. We will take the opportunity then to review the entire property record card, so that would include all the observations at the time of our inspection. Make sure that's correct, first and foremost. Secondly, we'll collect any new information that you might bring, revise information as necessary, and we will correct any existing data. Okay, and so before we conclude, I do want to let you know the fourth part of the process of the reassessment in which you can be involved and have some control over the outcome or product of the reassessment is by way of scheduling a formal assessment appeal. And so that part of the process will come after your new tentative assessed value, but essentially, if it's the case that you are not satisfied with the outcome of your informal review, should you request one, then you always have the opportunity in a more formal sense to appeal before the Board of Assessment and request a more formal change to your assessment at that time. And so 4 parts of the process in terms of your involvement. First part here today. Second part, correcting and returning the data mailers. Third part, participate in the informal review should you believe that we have overestimated the market value of your home. And then last but not least, the formal means of recourse, which would be to file an assessment appeal. So we are at Tyler ultimately focused on quality data collection. And together with quality data collection, there's an old saying in statistics, garbage in is garbage out. That very much rings true here. So we want to make sure we have quality data. Together with that, a detailed analysis and valuation or modeling phase to take that data and accurately predict the estimated market value of approximately 90,000 parcels throughout the county. And with an emphasis on accurate valuation and the associated review and hearing, will produce a reassessment that is focused on fairness, equity, and transparency. I just have a few more slides here and then we'll open it up for questions. So if you have any questions, please feel free to contact Mr. Ryan Zuck. He is Tyler's project supervisor in Kent County. There is an associated email and phone number, and this should also be present in your handouts should you need it for future use. Additionally, within Kent County, you can contact Ms. Sue Wilson. She is Kent County's assessment supervisor. Excuse me. And her contact information is both on the screens and is also available in the handouts that you have with you. For any more information, we've created a reassessment website. It's also linked or embedded within Kent County's government website. But if you have any more questions or concerns, or you just want some more information over time, or at some point when we notify you that we're coming to your neighborhood for field inspection and you're interested in potentially verifying the data collector, the individual who comes to your home, that's where the pictures of the data, the field staff will be. You can visit this website. And the URL is kind of long, but again, for your reference, it's in your handout. So thank you for the opportunity to present to you guys today. I appreciate it. And I'm sure that there are some questions. So if you could please kindly line up at either one of the podiums so that members attending virtually can also hear what your concerns might be. Thank you. Yes, sir. How are you?
Good afternoon. My name is Stephen DeBellis. I'm a recent resident. We just moved here in October, beginning of the month. My question is, how do you plan to adjust or deal with the pandemic? Our house, when we had it constructed, started with a price, got increased because of material prices, got increased because of associated construction problems, so that the true value, the house we ended up, what we paid for the house, was much more than what it was supposed to be at the beginning. So when you go to do an assessment and evaluation, are you going to look at the purchase price that's recorded here? Or are you going to give some consideration to the pandemic's price gouging problems? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for your question, Steve. And Stephen brings about a common concern. And so with COVID and the pandemic of what is COVID-19, it has created different market dynamics. And those dynamics are different across property classes. And so for the residential market, it's not uncommon to hear or to interpret from the market that home price indexes are on the rise. And so in its simplest form, it is more difficult to appraise where the markets are either rapidly increasing or decreasing. And so our job, Stephen, is to interpret the market and reflect those interpretations in the estimate of market value. And so again, you bring a very good concern and good question, not an uncommon question. And so our analysis will be predicated on interpreting the market. Now, should the market change over time, that is also something that we would have our thumb on and interpret that as well. And so I certainly appreciate your concern and the materials going up and things of that nature. Tyler's job, in order to estimate market value, is to simply interpret the market and reflect any changes that might occur. And so I hope that's answered your question. We will be sensitive to the issues brought about by COVID and its impact on the real estate market. And it certainly has had different impacts between different property classes. So thank you for your question, and I hope I've answered your question. Yes?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm sorry. Good afternoon. It's kind of a multi-part question. Will we know when Tyler will be in our specific neighborhood, like a time frame?
I can answer that one right now if
Okay,
you'd like. Yeah.
right, that
Yes.
segues into my next question, okay.
Yes, and so while we can't tell you exactly when we'll be at your specific parcel, what we will post in advance, again, in the interest of security and so everyone is aware, we will say, hey, during this week, we'll be in this particular neighborhood or subdivision.
Now, when you discuss measurements, if most people won't be home, I'm an extremely private person, which is why I live in the boondocks, in the woods on 7 acres.
Fair enough.
I don't really like the idea of somebody walking around my property. What if there's are they actually walking through the backyard, or what are they doing? Because
Right.
that's what I want to know.
Understandable. In Kent County, my understanding is that the exterior inspection will occur. If it's the case that you have a privacy fence around some or a portion of your property, let's say the side of your home and to the rear, then I do believe, in keeping with assessment protocol, that they will open the gate and enter for a rear inspection. If you have concerns, security concerns about that, then you can always call Mr. Zuck, and then you can state your concern in advance of your inspection, and then request that different accommodations are made to make you feel more comfortable.
So if you have a fence with a no trespassing sign, under what statute can a Tyler representative bypass the law to say that does not apply to us?
Understand, I wasn't aware that there was a no trespass. So,
Well,
yeah.
it's partial, so that's what I was wondering.
And
Because, I mean, you're talking about opening a fence, and then my dog comes out
right.
and attacks you. You know, he
Understandable
was
concern.
fenced in, you trespassed, so.
If you have a no trespassing sign, we'll consider that a partial refusal, and then we will use other means to verify what might be behind that.
Because I don't want, you know, I'm sure a lot of people don't want a situation where Tyler's like, oh, there's a fence, I'm just gonna walk in, and then they wonder why there's a German Shepherd on their ankle, so.
Understandable. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello.
I have several questions. Sure. So on the business aspect of the assessment that you're doing, is that also going to apply to farm ground?
Can you just clarify so I understand your question? Business aspect?
You have your assessment in here for businesses, so technically a farm ground is a business, so does that also mean that you're going to include farm parcels in your assessment?
So all parcels, good question, all parcels are subject throughout the county, including ag or farmland parcels. They will not be treated in the same manner in which residential or commercial parcels are treated. They will be considered as their own property class, and so they will be appraised similar to other agricultural, taking into account all the legal considerations that ag or farmland might have.
Okay, also, as it relates to the farm, we own farm property, but we rent our ground out. So will that additional income have to be reported?
If it's the case that you get an income and expense mailer for your farmland, then we would encourage you to fill it out to the best of your ability in its most truthful capacity. And so, yeah, that's information that we might ask for. It doesn't necessarily mean we will utilize it, but I think the degree to which the structure of your farm or agricultural operation is something that we're interested in knowing about to make sure that the estimate of market value is accurate as possible.
Okay, also in the Kent County area, right down the middle is what they call the growth zone. So is the growth zone assessment going to be different than non-growth zone estimations? Okay, so like I live in the town of Magnolia. It is right down the center of the state's growth zone, the county's growth zone. And so the property that's in there is at a higher value than the property that sits outside of the growth zone. So we have two parcels. We have a parcel inside the growth zone, and we have a parcel outside of the growth zone.
We would have to let the comparable sales dictate that, if it does have a difference on impacting
Well, I would think it would have an impact on the value, because if you have ground outside of the growth zone, you also have transfer development rights. So those transfer development rights, if we own property on the outside of the growth zone, we can move them to the inside where the growth zone is, and we could double our value for instance, you could put in an apartment complex versus just a single-family home. So is that also going to be taken into consideration? Okay. And then also I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. That's why we're here.
Also, in Kent County, we've been understanding in the growth zone area that if you have septic systems, that those septic systems, if they're over 25 years of age, must be replaced if you're going to sell your house. So is that also going to be included in your assessment?
We will be capturing the type of utility on that property, whether it's public, bottom septic, things of that nature.
Okay.
We will capture all of that in our
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name's Pat Donahue, and I'm president of an HOA. For me, the main question is how robust and transparent is your website going to be? Are the Eagle View pictures available? They've been done back in the spring. Are they available on a website where we can view them? Will the proposed values parcel by parcel be available to the general public so they can see what the parcel next door and across the street are assessed at? You said the website will have the pictures of the surveyors. I assume your scheduling and everything will be on this website.
It will.
So that's the question.
Yeah, let me answer the last one first, if I may.
Yeah.
Yes, the tentative inspection, the forthcoming inspections for any particular area will be posted to the reassessment website. As for your first two questions, I do not believe that the aerial imagery is available. It certainly will not be available through Tyler's reassessment website. And then your second question, I believe, was regarding values, and will values be available? Well, at the time at which the values are developed and posted and transferred or submitted to the county's assessment office, I would imagine, along with all other pieces of information that are matters of public record, be available for public review. And so the answer to your second question, I believe, is it will be available, just not at this time, not until the valuation is finalized.
So not at the time when you're trying to decide whether you need an informal hearing.
Correct. Again, I think we're encouraging everyone to say, once you get your informal or tentative assessment notice, the question you should ask is, can I sell my home for this? And if the answer is no, then we encourage you to schedule an informal appeal. And so, yes, your neighbor's values will be available. I do not believe they will be available until such time that the assessment roll is finalized. Sure.
Hi, my name's Linda Parkowski. I do economic development for the county. So I'm probably going to get questions from businesses, and especially industrial and commercial. So the thoughts of my questions are. And one suggestion, can you put a slide up of your list of classes so we know when you're talking about classes what you're talking about? That would be helpful. Is it standard to ask for income statements in your line of work?
Yeah, it's standard to ask for rent rolls and associated expenses specific only to the real estate. We're not asking for income statements, just to be clear. We're asking for what is the gross rent received in an apartment building and what kind of expenses do you have associated with that.
All right.
Yes, it's very typical.
So on the industrial property, say they don't rent it out, so they don't have to give you any kind of.
Right.
Well, I thought I read in the income approach that you were asking for basically a P&L.
Right, and I think what you're alluding to is, what if it's the case, and it's most common, I believe, in industrial, what if it's the case that it's an owner-occupied building? The owner of the real estate is also operating a business from that real estate. And so if that's the case, then technically the income received is zero, right? because they might not be paying themselves unless they separate their entities. Nonetheless, if that information is not congruent with the rest of other similar properties, then we would revert to market information.
Okay,
So similar properties that are.
That was another one of my questions. Say that the company says, no, I don't want to give you my P&L. What is plan B for you?
Revert to market.
Okay.
To find other similar rent.
All right, and then I had another question on one of your slides, and that's my last one, I promise. And it says that it's the bottom, they aren't numbered, but it begins with, will the county or school collect more taxes? And the bottom says, any additional revenues must be advertised as a tax increase and subject to approval. Can you explain that further?
Sure, and I think it's specific to the school district. If it's the case that they are attempting
Specific to what school?
to the school district.
School district.
Yes, that
Okay.
they have to, by law, publicly
Right.
post notice.
Okay, so that's not referring to Kent County's tax increase, or is it?
Well, it's not specifically. That is specific to the school district.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Can I ask a second one, or
Of course.
related to that question? I understand the theory, but then I see these parameters that the total tax revenue can go up by 15% at the county level, 10% at the school district level. Just worrying about the county level. What's Tyler's track record? How close does your total assessment replicate the 100, just the nice zero increase, zero decrease in taxes? Because that's theoretically, that's a good reassessment if it turns out that way. To me, 15% is way the heck off. That may be a Delaware tolerance, and if so, we can talk to the General Assembly about that. But it seems to me like 15% would be a very big bump in tax revenue.
Right, so good question. Two separate prongs to the answer here. And so Tyler's responsibility as part of the contract with Kent County is to estimate appropriately the market value of every parcel throughout the county. It is not Tyler's responsibility to adjust or amend the tax rate that is associated with that. And so I hope you understand that Tyler's responsibility stops at the estimation of market value for every parcel. And should you have concerns about the potential for tax implications, we would certainly encourage you to reach out to your local authorities. I hope I've answered your question. No? If what else can I help with?
Your example with the 0.30 tax rate versus
Right.
the new adjusted rate of 0.05, that's very nice and it's very precise. But reassessing all the properties just assesses what the value is, and presumably the math should flow so that the total revenue for the county should not be off by 15%. I'm not following, unless the levy court on purpose doesn't adjust the rate appropriately. Is that what you're saying? The only way that it could go up 15% is if they don't follow the rules correctly and try to get more revenue.
Sure. I mean, with all due respect, I certainly can't speak for the levy court, and I'm going to decline to do so. However, Ms. Dorham, would you like to address the gentleman's concern?
To make sure if I don't answer correctly, just keep asking. The original, when they're done their reassessment, the tax rate that will originally be set will be cost neutral. There'll be very little percentage of increase, maybe 1/millionth of a whatever, and it's considered cost neutral. Then at that time, if for some reason, budgeting constraints or whatever, or services that the levy court are going to provide that they need to generate more revenue and would do a tax increase at that time, it could not generate more than 15% for that year of what was already generated prior of the year the reassessment is established and in effect. So as far as adjusting it wrong, they have to adjust it to the cost neutral point. Does that answer? Mike, you want to say something?
Good afternoon. I'm Mike Pettit, the County Administrator. I just got here from another meeting, but what Susan just said is true. And what the state law requires us to do is once the valuations are established, and it appears that it was already discussed, that we have to calculate what's called in the law the rollback rate to bring the tax rate down to a revenue neutral position. And that's where our starting point is then. And any proposal to go above that rollback rate has to be advertised as a tax increase and has to be put out there for public hearing before levy court would adopt it. So, and the cap on that after a reassessment is 15%. There's no way, if we're compliant with the law, that we could sneak in a tax increase without anyone knowing it. Does that get it? Okay.
Sarah?
All right. Thank you for your
Appreciate
indulgence. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
My name's Tom Perbanik. I live in a subdivision of Stonegate. A couple questions for you. What interaction, if any, will there be between Tyler and the homeowners association? We have a homeowners association where we have 180 homeowners. Will there be any, again, with the reassessment, any interaction then? A second question would be if you reach an impasse where the property owner and the reassessment you don't come to any agreement, what's the appeal process?
Ryan, do you want to speak to the homeowners association?
At this point in time, there hasn't been any discussion with having a meeting with the HOA. However, I am definitely open to, thank you. I am definitely open to that, where we can have a discussion with the HOA in that particular subdivision, or any subdivision for that matter, prior to coming into that area, in hopes to, notify the property owners of the property of the reassessment going on.
Okay. I'll address it with our homeowners association.
Please.
Now, an appeal process, but when no one's in agreement, what's that process going to be?
And so the formal appeal process is slightly different than the informal appeal. The informal appeal really for you has less loophole or less holes through which you need to jump. And so merely a discussion to say, hey, I disagree with this aspect of what your data represents or what your estimated market value is, Tyler. The formal appeal process, information about the exact steps and the application can be found through the county's website. And if it's something that you'd like for us to send to you, we'd be happy to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
I apologize if this is repetitive, but I just would like clarification because I'm sure it's something a lot of people ask. The first gentleman that spoke and then the woman who spoke about the farm and the growth zone. Slide number 23 says comprehensive sales study will be conducted for all properties that sold within Kent County over a 30-month period ending on June 30th, 2023. That would mean from January 2021 through June 2023. It's well-known, well-documented media, Delaware Online, U.S. News, et cetera, that from June of 2020 through June of 2021, Delaware saw a 19.4% increase in values of homes, once again affecting growth zone, and that affects single-family dwellings more so than multi-units. So that is the concern, that this is being done now, and then once things start to slow down, those of us in the growth zone, those of us in the single-family dwellings, our house values are going to correct themselves. So it seems like those values, those homes are going to be very skewed. So is it just where, SOL or what?
No, certainly not SOL. Great question. Again, very common concern. As you stated, ma'am, the residential sector has, over the last handful of years, encountered rapid appreciation of price points. And so, again, our job, Tyler's job, is to interpret the current market. So in this vernacular, the 30-month period, Our job is to interpret the market and to establish values based on market realities. And so, to address your concern more particularly, you always have the option for every year, not just in years in which a reassessment occurs, for every year to appeal if you believe that your assessed value is greater than that current market value for that tax. And separately, I think it speaks to a larger point, which is, it goes back to one of the first slides, which is over time, and as time increases, there's an incongruency between the assessed value and the actual market value. And so I think one of the other options, again, at a larger level, is to more frequently reassess as opposed to letting it last for a handful of decades. That process of more frequent reassessments ensures that the assessments, again, are in line with the current market, whatever that market is for any given tax. And so, again, you really have that opportunity formally to appeal your assessment if it's the case that you believe that your assessed value is greater than the current market value of your home.
So you're saying, because I've had to get Bobby Outen, which was a state representative, to run interference for me with the county once a few years ago. So you're saying that if you assess my property and it's not quite the market value, in a couple of years from now, I can go to levy court, tax office, whomever, and say, no, my house isn't worth X number of dollars now.
Certainly every year, not just a year in which the reassessment occurs.
Okay.
Yep.
But then, okay.
That is your report. That's your formal meeting report.
For this reassessment, if you come across properties that have been approved developments, not developed, but approved developments,
Yeah.
will that also be taken into consideration with the assessment?
Of course. So vacant land versus land that has entitlements to it.
No, I'm talking about
homes
a
exist.
property that has come through the county.
Yeah.
In that growth zone area, for instance, I'm going to give you an example. There's 504 homes coming in the Magnolia area. It's already been approved. No development has started yet. So is that going to be taken into consideration when you assess the properties in that area?
Yeah.
Boy.
Any other questions, comments, issues, or concerns?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Richard Wilkins. I'm president of the Delaware Farm Bureau.
Good afternoon.
I think I know. My first question. I think I already know the answer to it. But in your aerial imagery and your assessment work so far to date, what's the highest percentage of land use in Kent County and Sussex County?
Well, I think, like you had said, sir, that you already know the answer. I'm assuming it's agricultural. However, I am not a local market expert, so I would ask Ryan if he knows the answer to that.
Bingo. Bingo.
I would have to assume agricultural, but I'm not 100% sure at this time.
Agricultural use, yes. More land in the state of Delaware is still dedicated to agricultural use than any other use. So I'm a little bit dismayed in your presentation, the lack of coverage. And to the previous questions, your non-specific reply as to how undeveloped agricultural land may be impacted during your reassessment process. I would offer, I think that my organization, the Delaware Farm Bureau, would love to be able to work together with you to put together a standalone specific informational session where farmers and agricultural landowners could come to that forum to be better informed, be able to ask their questions about how this process may impact the state's largest industry. We also, in our state, to me, unfortunately, in many of our agricultural communities, we've been encroached upon by subdivisions. Not that many of us are requesting that to happen, but I'm a little worried because many of our farms have structures on them, agricultural buildings. So do you have adequate expertise within your organization to be able to assess the valuation of a barn, an agricultural building, a poultry house?
Thank you for your concern and your statement. And first and foremost, we would be happy to conduct a more particular or specific presentation in conjunction with your organization that addresses any agricultural concerns. And so you make a great observation. Today's presentation is focused on the overview of the process. I appreciate that there are very particular concerns and laws that affect the agricultural industry that might not affect other property classes. And so point taken, and apologies, happy to work with you on a more specific informational session for agricultural. That said, Tyler is the largest reappraisal service firm in the country. We operate in over 30 states, and appraising agricultural land or any other property class is not foreign to us. So as to whether we have the expertise, yes, we believe we do. And we will also further take into account any particular laws that restrict or otherwise prohibit development for agricultural land, or again, any laws that may be particular to the state of Delaware or Kent County itself.
And so part of my to that previous question is I'm concerned that you may be having data collectors in a community looking at subdivisions, residential property, and because they're in that same community, there are unintended consequences that we could get a lot of inaccuracy or fallacies if those same data collectors are trying to come entering onto farm properties and trying to do assessment calculations and data collection when they're not adequately trained to be able to do that. And then I also remind you that in the state of Delaware, trespass is trespass, whether the property is posted or not. Trespass is trespass.
Thank you for that.
But I'll be around afterwards. Maybe we can discuss putting together a meeting for the agricultural community.
Happy to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you for your concern. Excuse me, sir, real quick. Sir, on your last comment, just for the record, the data collectors are not establishing value. They are merely verifying the characteristics of a home, or a farm in this case. They are not the ones responsible for valuation. And I would also like to say that we have a 3-level quality control process internally to ensure that an experienced appraisal staff will oversee, again, at 2 different levels, the projections related to all classes of property. Yes.
The data collection information will go out to the property owners before the interview? That's
correct, yes.
A property owner that has had 2 property assessments, one residential, one agricultural, will that remain that way? It would be reasonable to be 2 assessments will still be that way?
Yeah, so long as nothing has changed, yes.
Okay.
Any further questions from those present in the room today? Otherwise, we'll open it up for any virtual attendees who might have questions. Mark, anyone?
So at this time, we'll open up the floor for questions on our WebEx platform. And some of the early part of the meeting, because of technical difficulties, they may have missed some portion of your presentation. So we ask that those in the audience bear with us if there may be a repeating of information going forward. So for those on our WebEx or joining by phone, If you wanted to ask a question at this time, please press *3 to raise your hand if you're on a phone, or use your hand raise icon if you're on your web or mobile device, and we'll let you into the room at this time. Again, one more time, we'll open the floor on WebEx for questions at this time. Please press *3 to raise your hand, *6 to unmute. I see no questions on WebEx at this time.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. So thank you all for attending today. We appreciate the opportunity to give you more information about the reassessment. And again, should you have any concerns throughout the process, please feel free to reach out to Mr. Ryan Zuck or consult our reassessment website. We'd be happy to speak with each and every one of you that have further concerns. Thank you.
Question I want to just ask. Are you hired? I'm the job. Hook me up.